The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window as William stirred his coffee, watching the steam rise in gentle spirals. At 42, he had built what many would consider a perfect life. His accounting firm was thriving, his 3-bedroom house in the suburbs was finally paid off, and, most importantly, he had Kate. Beautiful, intelligent Kate, who had been his anchor for the past 8 years. William glanced at the framed photo on the counter, their last vacation to the mountains, both of them grinning widely with the sunset painting the sky behind them. Kate's laugh seemed to echo from the image, that infectious sound that had first captured his heart at a coffee shop downtown. She had spilled her latte on his newspaper, and, instead of being annoyed, he found himself completely charmed by her flustered apologies and bright green eyes. That was 8 years ago. 8 years of shared dreams, quiet Sunday mornings, and building a life together brick by brick. They had talked about marriage countless times, and, while they never officially walked down the aisle, their commitment felt as solid as any certificate. They shared everything: bank accounts, a home, a future they had carefully planned together. William's phone buzzed against the granite countertop, pulling him from his memories. A text from his business partner, Derek, asking about the Morrison account. He typed a quick response, then noticed he had missed 3 calls from Kate. Strange. She was usually busy during her morning rounds at the hospital where she worked as a nurse practitioner. He had tried calling her back twice yesterday evening, but her phone went straight to voicemail. The calls had become less frequent lately, he realized with a small frown. Where they once spoke multiple times throughout the day, sharing every small detail and inside joke, now sometimes entire days passed with just brief text exchanges about groceries or bills. William shook off the uncomfortable thought. Relationships evolved, he told himself. They were both busy professionals. It was natural for the constant communication of their early years to settle into something more comfortable and routine. Kate was probably just swamped with her new position in the cardiac unit. She had been working longer hours, often coming home exhausted and distracted. The house felt different when she wasn't there. Larger somehow, with too many quiet corners and empty spaces that seemed to swallow sound. William had grown so accustomed to Kate's presence, her humming while she cooked, the rustle of her medical journals, the way she talked to their cat, Mr. Whiskers, in a baby voice that never failed to make him smile. He finished his coffee and headed to his home office to review some client files before heading to the firm. The Morrison account needed his attention, and there was a new potential client coming in at 10. William prided himself on his attention to detail, his ability to organize complex financial situations into clear, manageable plans. It was a skill that had served him well in business and in life. As he pulled up the Morrison files on his computer, William found his mind wandering again to Kate. She had been different lately, more distant and distracted. When he asked about her day, her responses had become shorter, less detailed. She used to tell him everything about difficult patients, office politics, even what she had for lunch. Now she offered only brief summaries before turning her attention to her phone or a medical journal. William told himself he was overthinking things. Every long-term relationship went through phases. They had weathered rough patches before, like when his father died 3 years ago and he had retreated into work, or when Kate's sister went through her messy divorce and Kate spent weeks providing emotional support and babysitting duties. They had always found their way back to each other. But this felt different somehow. Kate wasn't dealing with external stress that he could identify and support her through. She was simply elsewhere. Even when she was physically present, sitting across from him at dinner or lying next to him in bed, part of her seemed absent, as if her thoughts were somewhere he couldn't reach. Last week, he had suggested they plan a weekend getaway, maybe return to the mountain cabin where they had taken that photo. Kate had nodded and said it sounded nice, but when he brought it up again 2 days later, she looked at him blankly, as if she had no memory of the conversation. When he reminded her, she laughed it off and blamed her busy schedule, but William caught something in her expression, a flicker of discomfort, maybe even guilt. He closed the Morrison file and rubbed his temples. Perhaps he was being paranoid. Perhaps Kate was simply going through something she wasn't ready to share yet. They had always given each other space when needed. It was one of the things he loved about their relationship, the lack of pressure, the easy comfort they had built together. William's phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. Derek's name appeared on the screen. Morning, Derek. I was just reviewing the Morrison account. Good, good. Listen, I'm running late for the 10 o'clock with the new client. Can you handle the initial consultation? I should be there by 11. Of course. What's the situation? Divorce settlement. Pretty messy from what I understand. The wife needs help organizing assets before the final hearing. William felt an unexpected chill at the word divorce. He pushed the feeling aside and focused on Derek's instructions about the client files and preliminary questions to ask. After hanging up, William gathered his materials and headed to the office. The drive through town was familiar and comforting, past the park where he and Kate sometimes walked on weekends, by the grocery store where they shopped together every Saturday morning, through the neighborhood where they had first talked about maybe buying a bigger house someday, one with a proper garden and space for the children they had casually discussed having. The office building's parking lot was nearly full when he arrived. William straightened his tie and grabbed his briefcase, mentally shifting into professional mode. Whatever was happening with Kate, whatever distance had grown between them, could be addressed later. For now, he had clients to serve and problems to solve. His secretary, Mrs. Chen, greeted him with her usual efficient smile and handed him a stack of messages. The divorce consultation client had arrived early and was waiting in conference room B. William took a deep breath, organized his notes, and headed down the hall. The woman sitting at the conference table looked to be in her late 30s, with carefully styled brown hair and expensive clothes that couldn't quite hide the strain around her eyes. She stood when William entered, extending a manicured hand. "Mr. Patterson? I'm Sarah Mitchell. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. Please, sit down. I understand you're dealing with a divorce settlement?" Sarah's composed facade cracked slightly. "Yes. 20 years of marriage, and he found someone else. Someone younger." She laughed bitterly. "I suppose it's a cliché, isn't it? But clichés exist for a reason." William felt another uncomfortable twist in his stomach. He pushed aside the image of Kate that immediately came to mind and focused on his client. "I'm sorry you're going through this. Divorce is never easy, regardless of the circumstances. What I need to do first is get a clear picture of your financial situation." For the next hour, William lost himself in the familiar rhythm of professional consultation. Assets, liabilities, property division, retirement accounts, the concrete details that formed the skeleton of a dissolving marriage. Sarah Mitchell had been thorough in her preparation, bringing bank statements, property deeds, and investment portfolios organized in neat folders. "The house is paid off," she explained, "but he wants to sell it and split the proceeds. 20 years we lived there. I planted every flower in that garden, chose every paint color, made every room into our home. Now it's just another asset to be divided." William made careful notes, but found himself thinking about his own house, the one he shared with Kate. They had painted the bedroom together 2 summers ago, laughing as they got more paint on each other than on the walls. Kate had insisted on a soft blue that reminded her of the sky on perfect days. She said it made her feel calm when she came home from difficult shifts at the hospital. "Mr. Patterson?" Sarah's voice pulled him back to the present. "I asked about retirement accounts. How are those typically handled?" "I'm sorry, my mind wandered for a moment. Yes, retirement accounts." William refocused on the consultation, but something Sarah had said earlier kept echoing in his mind. 20 years, and he found someone else. Someone younger. Kate was 36 to his 42. Not a significant age difference, but lately William had been increasingly aware of the years between them. Kate was still young enough to start over, to build a completely different life if she chose. The thought had never bothered him before, but now it settled in his chest like a cold weight. Derek arrived as scheduled and took over the consultation, allowing William to return to his office. But concentration proved elusive. Every few minutes, he found himself reaching for his phone to call Kate, then stopping himself. She was working. She would call when she had time. Lunch passed in a blur of client calls and paperwork. William ordered a sandwich from the deli down the street and ate at his desk, reviewing contracts and filing reports. The routine tasks usually calmed him, but today they felt hollow, mechanical motions that failed to engage his mind. At 3 o'clock, his phone buzzed with a text message. "Kate. Finally. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. We need to talk soon." William stared at the message for a long time. Working late again, that was becoming increasingly common. But it was the last sentence that made his blood run cold.
We need to talk soon.
In his experience, those words never preceded good news. He tried calling her immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. Her voice, warm and familiar, asked him to leave a message, but William found himself unable to speak.
What would he say? I'm scared. Please tell me everything is okay. I love you and I don't know what's happening to us.
He hung up without leaving a message and sat staring at his computer screen, seeing nothing. The afternoon stretched ahead of him like an eternity. How was he supposed to focus on tax forms and investment portfolios when his entire world felt like it was shifting beneath his feet?
The words echoed in his mind, we need to talk soon. Kate had never been one for dramatic pronouncements. She was direct, practical, honest.
If she said they needed to talk, it meant something serious.
Something that couldn't wait much longer. William tried to tell himself it could be anything.
Maybe she wanted to discuss her career, there had been talk of a promotion that might require relocation. Maybe she was concerned about their finances, or wanted to revisit their conversation about marriage. Maybe she was pregnant, and the distance he had sensed was just her processing the news before sharing it with him. But, deep in his gut, beneath all the rational explanations he tried to construct, William knew. The way she had been pulling away, the increasing time apart, the careful distance in her voice when they did speak, these were not the signs of someone preparing to share happy news.
The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of forced productivity.
William completed his tasks through sheer muscle memory, his mind circling endlessly around Kate's message. By 5 o'clock, when the office began to empty, he could no longer pretend to work. He packed his briefcase and headed home, dreading the empty house that awaited him. The drive home took him past the hospital where Kate worked. On impulse, he pulled into the parking lot and sat in his car, scanning the rows of vehicles for Kate's blue Honda. He found it in the far corner of the lot, right where she always parked under the large oak tree. So she was here, really working as she had said. William sat in his car for nearly an hour, watching the hospital's main entrance. Nurses and doctors came and went, some he recognized from hospital events he had attended with Kate. But Kate herself never appeared. Finally, feeling foolish and slightly stalkerish, he drove home. The house was exactly as he had left it that morning, coffee mug still in the sink, newspaper folded on the kitchen table, Mr. Whiskers curled in his favorite spot by the window. But somehow it felt different, charged with intention that hadn't been there before. William heated leftover pasta for dinner and ate mechanically while watching the evening news. Stories of distant conflicts and political debates washed over him without registering. All he could think about was Kate, somewhere across town, preparing to have a conversation that would change everything. By 10 o'clock, exhaustion finally overtook anxiety. William got ready for bed, leaving Kate's bedside lamp on as he always did when she worked late. He lay in the dark, listening for the sound of her key in the door, her soft footsteps on the stairs, the gentle rustle as she got ready for bed. But the house remained silent. Sleep came eventually, fitful and filled with uneasy dreams. William found himself walking through empty rooms, calling Kate's name, his voice echoing off bare walls. He woke several times, reaching across the bed for her warmth, finding only cool sheets and the lingering scent of her perfume on the pillow. The next morning arrived gray and overcast, matching William's mood as he woke to find Kate's side of the bed still empty and undisturbed. Her pillow remained exactly as he had arranged it the night before, the covers still tucked neatly at the corners.
She hadn't come home at all.
William reached for his phone immediately, hoping for a message explaining her absence.
Nothing.
He called her number and, again, reached voicemail. This time he left a brief message, trying to keep the worry out of his voice.
Hey, just wanted to make sure you're okay. Call me when you get a chance.
He went through his morning routine mechanically, showering and dressing for work while his mind raced through possible explanations.
Maybe there had been an emergency at the hospital.
Maybe she had crashed at a colleague's place after a particularly difficult shift. Maybe her phone had died and she couldn't call.
But none of these explanations felt right. Kate was responsible, considerate.
Even during her most exhausting shifts, she always found a way to let him know where she was. In 8 years together, she had never simply disappeared without explanation. William made coffee with shaking hands, spilling grounds across the counter in his distraction. The normalcy of the morning routine felt surreal against the growing panic in his chest. How could he be performing these same daily tasks when everything felt like it was falling apart? By 7:30, he couldn't stand the silence anymore. He called Kate's best friend, Jennifer, a fellow nurse who had been maid of honor at Jennifer's own wedding 2 years ago. Kate and Jennifer had been friends since nursing school, and if anyone would know what was happening, it would be her.
William?
Jennifer's voice was careful, guarded in a way that immediately put him on alert.
How are you? I'm worried, actually. Kate didn't come home last night, and I can't reach her. I thought maybe you might know where she is?
There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Jennifer spoke again, her voice was softer, tinged with something that sounded like pity.
William, I think you need to talk to Kate.
I'm trying to, but she's not answering her phone.
Jennifer, please, if you know something. It's not my place to say anything. But, William, maybe you should go to the hospital. Kate's working a double shift today. She's at the hospital? Yes. Look, I have to go. My shift starts in 20 minutes. Just be gentle with yourself, okay?
The line went dead, leaving William staring at his phone in confusion.
Be gentle with yourself? What did that mean? And why had Jennifer sounded so sad, so careful, as if she were delivering bad news? William grabbed his keys and headed for the door. Whatever was happening, whatever Kate needed to tell him, he couldn't wait any longer. The uncertainty was eating him alive. The drive to the hospital felt like the longest 20 minutes of his life. Traffic seemed deliberately slow, every red light an eternity. William gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, practicing what he would say when he found Kate. Maybe they were both overreacting. Maybe this was all a simple misunderstanding that could be cleared up with an honest conversation.
The hospital parking lot was bustling with morning shift changes. William parked near the main entrance and headed for the information desk, where an elderly volunteer smiled at him kindly.
I'm looking for Kate Morrison. She's a nurse practitioner in the cardiac unit. The volunteer checked her computer screen.
I'm sorry, but Ms. Morrison isn't scheduled to work today.
William felt the floor shift beneath his feet. Are you sure? Maybe she picked up an extra shift? Let me double-check. The volunteer's fingers clicked across the keyboard.
No, I'm showing her last shift ended yesterday at 6 p.m.
She's not scheduled again until Monday.
But someone told me she was working a double shift today. The volunteer's expression grew concerned.
Sir, are you all right? You look very pale.
William mumbled something about being fine and walked away on unsteady legs.
Kate had lied to Jennifer.
She had lied to him. She wasn't at the hospital at all, which meant she was somewhere else.
With someone else.
The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. The distance, the missed calls, the late nights that were becoming more frequent.
Kate was having an affair. She had to be. What other explanation could there be for the lies, the secrecy, the careful way she had been pulling away from him?
William made it to his car before the full impact hit him. He sat in the driver's seat, hands trembling as he tried to process what he had learned. 8 years. 8 years of building a life together, of shared dreams and quiet intimacy, of believing they were partners in everything.
How long had she been living a lie? How long had he been a fool?
His phone rang, startling him from his spiral of thoughts. Kate's name appeared on the screen, and, for a moment William just stared at it, unsure if he could handle hearing her voice. Finally, on the fourth ring, he answered.
William? I got your message. I'm sorry I didn't call back sooner. Her voice sounded normal, warm even, which somehow made everything worse.
How could she sound so casual when his world was crumbling?
Where are you, Kate? I had to stay late last night.
There was a situation with a patient, and then I crashed at Jennifer's place because I was too tired to drive home safely.
Another lie.
William closed his eyes, feeling sick.
Kate, I went to the hospital. They said you weren't scheduled to work today.
The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like hours. When Kate spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, defeated.
William, we really do need to talk. Can you come home? I'll be there in an hour. I'm not at home. I'm at the hospital, looking for you. Please, just go home. I'll explain everything when I get there. The line went dead.
William sat in his car for several more minutes, trying to gather the strength to drive.
His hands were shaking so badly he could barely grip the steering wheel. Whatever Kate needed to tell him, whatever explanation she had prepared, he knew it would destroy everything he had believed about their life together. The drive home passed in a blur. William moved through the motions automatically, stopping at red lights and making turns without really seeing the road. His mind kept circling back to memories, searching for signs he had missed. Had Kate always been capable of such deception? Had their entire relationship been built on lies he had been too trusting to see? Back at the house, William found himself unable to sit still. He paced from room to room, seeing their shared life through new eyes. The photos on the mantelpiece that he had looked at with such affection that morning now seemed like evidence of his own naivety. The coffee mug Kate always used, sitting in the dishwasher, looked like a prop in an elaborate performance. Mr. Whiskers followed him from room to room, sensing his agitation. The cat had always been more Kate's than his, responding to her voice and seeking her attention. Even their pet would probably choose Kate when the inevitable division of their life occurred. William tried to imagine what the conversation would be like. Would Kate be apologetic? Defensive? Would she try to explain how it had happened, or simply announce that she was leaving? Would she tell him about the other man, who he was, how they had met, how long it had been going on? The questions multiplied in his mind until he felt dizzy with them. He sat down heavily on the couch where he and Kate had spent countless evenings watching movies and talking about their days. How many of those conversations had been lies? How many times had she sat next to him, pretending to be content, while her heart and mind were elsewhere? At exactly 12 o'clock, William heard Kate's key in the front door. The familiar sound, once so comforting, now made his stomach clench with dread. He remained on the couch, unable to trust his legs to support him, and waited for her to find him. Kate appeared in the living room doorway looking tired and nervous. She had changed clothes since yesterday, William noticed, wearing a blue dress he didn't recognize. Her hair was styled differently too, softer somehow. She looked beautiful and foreign at the same time, like a stranger wearing his girlfriend's face. "Hi," she said quietly, hovering near the doorway as if afraid to come closer. "Hi." William's voice came out rougher than he intended. Kate moved to the chair across from the couch, carefully avoiding his eyes. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between them. "I know you have questions," Kate finally said. "And I know I owe you explanations. I don't know how to start." "Start with the truth," William said. "Any part of it." Kate's hands twisted in her lap. "I've been seeing someone else." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Even though William had known, hearing Kate say it out loud felt like being punched in the chest. He couldn't breathe for a moment, couldn't think of any response that would make sense. "How long?" he managed to ask. 3 months. 3 months. William did the math quickly. That meant it had started in September, right around Kate's birthday. They had celebrated with dinner at her favorite restaurant, and she had seemed happy, grateful for the small surprises he had arranged. She had kissed him that night and told him she loved him, and apparently it had already been a lie. Who is he? Dr. James Carter. He's a cardiologist at the hospital. The name meant nothing to William, but somehow that made it worse. Kate had built an entire secret relationship with a complete stranger, someone whose existence William had never even suspected. "Do you love him?" Kate's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Yes." That single word destroyed whatever small hope William had been clinging to. If it had been just physical, maybe they could have worked through it. Maybe they could have found a way to rebuild trust and move forward. But love changed everything. "And us?" William asked. "What about us?" "I do love you, William. I've loved you for 8 years. But I'm not in love with you anymore. I haven't been for a while, and I think you know that too." William wanted to argue, to insist that what they had was real and worth fighting for. But, looking at Kate's face, seeing the resolution in her expression, he realized she was right. The distance he had sensed, the growing space between them, it hadn't been his imagination. Kate had been pulling away because she was already gone. "So what happens now?" he asked. "I'm moving out. James has an apartment across town, and he's asked me to move in with him. I've already packed some things. They're in my car." The practical details felt surreal. While William had been struggling to understand what was happening, Kate had apparently been making concrete plans to leave. She had reduced 8 years of shared life to whatever could fit in her car. What about the house? Our accounts? All of our. William gestured helplessly at the room around them, at the accumulated evidence of their life together. We can work all that out. I don't want to make this any harder than it has to be. I'm not trying to hurt you, William. I know that's impossible to believe right now, but it's true. Then, why? William's voice broke. If you didn't want to hurt me, why didn't you just end things before you started seeing him? Why did you let me believe everything was fine for 3 months? Kate wiped tears from her cheeks. Because I was scared. Because I kept thinking maybe it was just a phase, maybe I could figure out how to be happy with what we had. Because I didn't want to throw away 8 years without being sure. And, now you're sure? Yes. They sat in silence again, both of them crying quietly. William felt like he was watching his life from outside his body, observing his own devastation with strange detachment. This morning he had been a man with a girlfriend and a shared future. Now he was someone whose life had been split neatly in half, before Kate left, and after. I should pack the rest of my things, Kate said eventually. William nodded, not trusting his voice. Kate stood and moved toward the stairs, then paused. For what it's worth, William, you're a good man. You deserve someone who loves you the way you love them. I hope someday you'll forgive me for not being that person. She disappeared up the stairs, leaving William alone in the living room that no longer felt like home. He could hear her moving around upstairs, opening drawers and closets, gathering the pieces of her life to take with her. Each small sound felt like another small death. William thought about following her, about trying one more time to understand how they had gotten to this point. But what was there left to say? Kate had made her choice, and all the words in the world couldn't change it. Instead, he sat on the couch and tried to imagine what his life would look like starting tomorrow. How did someone rebuild after 8 years? How did he tell his friends, his family, his colleagues that the relationship everyone had assumed was solid had simply ended? How did he learn to sleep alone in a bed that would smell like Kate's perfume for weeks? An hour later, Kate came back downstairs carrying 2 large suitcases. Mr. Whiskers followed her, sensing something was happening. I'll come back for the rest later, when you're at work. If that's okay. William nodded again. Speaking seemed impossible. Kate set down her suitcases and knelt next to Mr. Whiskers, scratching behind his ears. Be good for William, okay? Take care of him. She stood and looked at William for a long moment, her face full of sadness and regret. I'm sorry, William. I'm so sorry it happened this way. Then, she picked up her suitcases and walked out the front door, closing it quietly behind her. William heard her car start and pull out of the driveway, the sound of her leaving growing fainter until it disappeared entirely. He remained on the couch as the afternoon faded into evening, too stunned to move or think clearly. Mr. Whiskers eventually jumped onto the couch next to him, purring softly as if offering comfort. William scratched the cat's head absently, grateful for the small warm presence in the suddenly empty house. When darkness finally fell, William forced himself to get up and turn on some lights. He made a sandwich he couldn't eat and opened a beer he couldn't taste. The house felt enormous without Kate in it, every room echoing with her absence. That night, William lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Kate's pillow still carrying the scent of her shampoo. Tomorrow he would have to start the process of rebuilding his life from scratch. But tonight, he simply let himself grieve for everything they had lost, and everything they would never have the chance to become. The following weeks blurred together in a haze of mechanical existence. William went through the motions of living, showering, eating, working, but felt like he was watching someone else's life unfold. The house that had once felt like home now seemed like a museum of his former happiness, each room containing reminders of Kate that he couldn't escape. Derek had noticed the change immediately. You look like hell, he said bluntly during their Monday morning meeting. What's going on? William had practiced this conversation in his head dozens of times, but when the moment came, the words stuck in his throat. Kate and we broke up. Derek's expression softened with genuine concern. Jesus, William. I'm sorry. What happened? She found someone else.
Those 4 words seemed to contain the entire story, and Derek was wise enough not to press for details. Instead, he quietly redistributed some of William's more demanding clients and suggested he take some time off. William declined the time off. Work was the only thing that still made sense, the only place where he felt capable and in control. But even work couldn't provide complete escape. Sarah Mitchell, the divorce client, had become a regular presence in the office as they worked through the complex division of her 20-year marriage. Every conversation about property division and asset allocation felt like a preview of William's own future, a glimpse into the practical mechanics of disentangling a shared life. The hardest part isn't the financial stuff, Sarah confided during one of their sessions. It's learning how to be alone again. I've been half of a couple for so long, I'm not sure who I am by myself anymore. William understood exactly what she meant. For 8 years, his identity had been intertwined with Kate's. He was Kate's boyfriend, part of William and Kate, a unit that made decisions together and faced the world as a team. Now he was just William, adrift in a life that suddenly felt too big and too empty. The practical aspects of separation proved surprisingly complicated. Kate had been true to her word about not wanting to make things difficult, but even the most amicable breakup involved countless small decisions about who got what. She had left most of the furniture, taking only personal items and a few pieces that had special meaning to her. But her absence made every object in the house feel wrong somehow. The coffee maker they had bought together now seemed too big for one person. The king-size bed felt vast and lonely. Even Mr. Whiskers seemed depressed, spending most of his time curled up in the spot where Kate used to sit, waiting for her return. William tried dating, encouraged by well-meaning friends who insisted that the best way to get over someone was to find someone new. Derek's wife set him up with her sister's co-worker, a pleasant woman named Linda who worked in marketing and enjoyed hiking. Their dinner conversation was perfectly nice, but William found himself comparing everything to Kate, the way Linda laughed versus Kate's infectious giggle, her preference for red wine instead of Kate's beloved white wine, her careful politeness instead of Kate's easy warmth. The date ended with an awkward handshake and mutual agreement that they weren't right for each other. William drove home feeling more alone than before. 3 months after Kate left, William was sorting through mail when he found an envelope addressed to both of them, an invitation to their friends Mark and Jessica's wedding. The sight of their names written together, William Patterson and Kate Morrison, hit him like a physical blow. He stared at the elegant script for several minutes before throwing the invitation in the trash, then immediately retrieving it. Mark and Jessica had been their closest couple friends, people they had double-dated with and vacationed with. William wasn't sure if Kate had already told them about the breakup, or if he would be expected to explain her absence. The thought of attending alone seemed unbearable, but declining would require explanations he wasn't ready to give. He decided to call Mark, but ended up hanging up after 2 rings. What would he say? How did you tell people that your seemingly solid relationship had simply ended, that the woman they knew as his partner had fallen in love with someone else? The phone rang before he could put it down. Kate's number appeared on the screen, and William's heart immediately began racing. They had spoken only once since she moved out, a brief and businesslike conversation about transferring the car insurance. Hearing from her now felt like reopening a wound that had just begun to heal. "Hi, William." "Hi." His voice came out steadier than he felt. "I got the invitation to Mark and Jessica's wedding. I wanted to call and coordinate, I guess. Figure out how to handle it." The casualness in her voice struck him as wrong. How could she discuss coordinating their social lives as if they were divorced co-parents managing custody arrangements? "I haven't decided if I'm going," William said. "Oh." There was a pause. "Well, I was planning to attend. Jessica asked me to be in the wedding party months ago, and I don't want to let her down. But, if you'd rather I not go." The generosity of the offer somehow made everything worse. Kate was willing to skip her friend's wedding to avoid making William uncomfortable, and he hated that she felt obligated to make that choice. "No, you should go. Jessica needs you there." "Are you sure? We could probably work out a schedule, or..." "Kate, just go to the wedding. I'll figure something out." Another pause. "How are you doing, William?" "Really?" The question caught him off guard. For a moment, he wanted to tell her the truth, that he was barely sleeping, that food had lost all taste, that he spent most evenings sitting in his car outside the hospital where she worked, hoping for a glimpse of her life without him. Instead, he said, "I'm fine.
getting by. I'm glad. I worry about you.
The words were meant to be kind, but they felt like salt in an open wound. Kate got to worry about him from the comfort of her new relationship, while he struggled alone with the wreckage she had left behind.
I should go, he said. William, wait. There's something else I need to tell you. William's grip on the phone tightened. What? James and I, we're engaged. The world went silent. William couldn't hear anything except the rushing of blood in his ears. Engaged.
6 months after leaving him, Kate was already planning to marry someone else.
William? Are you there? Yeah, he managed. I'm here. I wanted you to hear it from me, before you found out some other way. I know it's fast, but when you know, you know. You understand that, right? Did he understand?
William tried to remember if he had ever felt the kind of certainty about Kate that she apparently felt about this other man.
Had there been a moment when he simply knew she was the one, or had their relationship been a slow, comfortable drift into commitment?
Congratulations, he said, the word tasting like ashes.
Thank you. And, William.
I hope someday you'll find what James and I have.
You deserve to be happy.
The line went dead, leaving William staring at his phone in disbelief.
Kate was engaged.
In 6 months, she had not only replaced him but upgraded to someone she loved enough to marry. Meanwhile, William couldn't even get through a first date without thinking about her. He set the phone down carefully and walked to the kitchen, where he poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey despite the fact that it was only 2 in the afternoon. The alcohol burned his throat but did nothing to numb the pain in his chest.
Engaged.
The word echoed in his mind as he tried to process what it meant. Kate was planning a wedding with another man, choosing flowers and venues and wedding dresses. She was building a future that would officially and permanently exclude William from her life. He thought about the conversations they used to have about marriage, the casual way they had discussed it as an eventual possibility. Someday, Kate would say when friends asked when they were getting married.
We're in no hurry.
William had assumed that meant they both felt secure enough in their relationship to let it evolve naturally. Now he wondered if it had simply meant Kate wasn't sure he was the right person. Apparently, James Carter was the right person. Kate had known him for 3 months and was already certain enough to accept his proposal.
What did that say about the 8 years she had spent with William? Had they been nothing more than a comfortable placeholder while she waited for something better?
The whiskey was making his thoughts darker, more self-destructive.
William set the glass down and tried to focus on practical matters. He needed to RSVP to the wedding, needed to decide whether to go alone or skip it entirely.
He needed to call his mother and tell her about the breakup before she heard it from someone else. He needed to figure out what to do with Kate's remaining belongings, the ones she had said she would collect but never had. Most of all, he needed to find a way to stop loving someone who was planning to marry another man.
That evening, William made a decision that felt both necessary and masochistic.
He drove to the hospital where Kate worked and parked across the street, watching for any sign of her. He told himself he just wanted to see if she looked happy, if her new life suited her as well as she claimed. At 7:30, Kate emerged from the main entrance, and William's breath caught in his throat. She looked radiant, not just happy, but glowing in a way he rarely remembered seeing during their years together. She was wearing the blue dress from the day she had told him about the affair, and her hair caught the light from the parking lot lamps. A man appeared beside her, tall and dark-haired with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge.
Dr. James Carter, presumably. He wrapped his arm around Kate's waist and said something that made her laugh, that same infectious laugh William had fallen in love with 8 years ago. They kissed briefly before getting into a silver BMW that was much newer and more expensive than Kate's Honda. William watched them drive away, then sat in his car for another hour, trying to understand how his life had become something he needed to observe from a distance. The drive home felt endless. Every street reminded him of places he and Kate had been together, restaurants they had tried, shops they had browsed on lazy Saturday afternoons. The city that had once felt like theirs now seemed like foreign territory, full of memories that belonged to a different version of himself. Back at the house, William found Mr. Whiskers waiting by the door, as if he too had been hoping Kate might return. The cat followed him to the kitchen and sat hopefully by his food bowl, even though he had been fed hours earlier. "She's not coming back," William said aloud, the words sounding strange in the empty kitchen. "It's just us now."
Mr. Whiskers meowed once, as if acknowledging the new reality, then padded away to his favorite sleeping spot. William envied the cat's ability to accept change so readily, to adapt to new circumstances without dwelling on what had been lost. That night, William lay in bed thinking about Kate's engagement ring. He wondered what it looked like, whether James had chosen something traditional or unique. Had he known Kate's ring size, or had he guessed? Had he asked Kate's father for permission, following traditions that William had never bothered with? William had actually bought a ring once, about 2 years into their relationship. It had been an impulsive purchase after a particularly happy weekend together, a simple solitaire that had seemed perfect for Kate's practical nature. But he had never found the right moment to propose, and eventually the ring had ended up in his sock drawer, forgotten. He wondered if he still had it, if Kate had ever found it during her packing. The thought of her discovering his abandoned proposal plans while she was leaving for another man was almost too painful to contemplate. Sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams of weddings and empty houses, of Kate in a white dress that wasn't meant for him. William woke several times, reaching across the bed for someone who would never be there again, each awakening a fresh reminder that his life had been permanently altered by someone else's choice to find happiness elsewhere. 1 year after Kate left, William had settled into a routine of careful numbness. He worked longer hours at the firm, took on the most challenging cases, and allowed himself to be consumed by other people's financial problems. It was easier than confronting his own emotional bankruptcy. The house had been gradually transformed from the home he had shared with Kate into something that was entirely his, sterile and functional, with no traces of the warmth that had once filled those rooms. He had donated most of Kate's remaining belongings to charity, keeping only a few photographs that he couldn't quite bring himself to throw away. Mark and Jessica's wedding had come and gone without him. William had sent a generous gift with his regrets, claiming a last-minute work emergency that no one questioned. He heard through mutual friends that Kate had been beautiful in her bridesmaid dress, that she and James had been the picture of happiness, that several people had asked when their own wedding would be. The answer came sooner than expected. In late October, exactly 13 months after Kate had walked out of his life, William received an elegant ivory envelope in his mailbox. His name was written in calligraphy across the front, and, even before opening it, he knew what it contained. Kate Morrison and Dr. James Carter request the pleasure of your company at their wedding ceremony on December 15th, at St. Mary's Cathedral. William stared at the invitation for a long time, trying to process the surreal fact that the woman he had loved for 8 years was formally inviting him to watch her marry someone else. It was either the cruelest gesture imaginable or an act of breathtaking thoughtlessness. He couldn't decide which would be worse. His first instinct was to throw the invitation away and pretend he had never received it. But something kept him from discarding it immediately. Maybe it was the finality of it, the official end to any fantasy that Kate might change her mind and come back. Maybe it was the need to face the reality he had been avoiding for over a year. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in December, exactly 2 weeks before Christmas. Kate had always loved winter weddings, he remembered. She used to talk about how romantic it would be to exchange vows surrounded by snow and candlelight, to begin a new life during the season of renewal. William spent the next several weeks trying to decide what to do about the invitation. Derek advised him to ignore it entirely. Why put yourself through that, he asked. You don't owe her anything. But William's mother, when he finally told her about the invitation during one of their weekly phone calls, surprised him with a different perspective. Maybe you should go, she said thoughtfully. Not for Kate, but for yourself. Sometimes we need to see something end completely before we can really start to heal. I don't think I can watch her marry someone else, Mom. I know it seems impossible now, sweetheart. But you've been stuck in this place for over a year, holding on to something that's already gone. Maybe witnessing her happiness with someone else will finally allow you to let go and find your own happiness. His mother's words stayed with him as December approached. William found himself thinking more and more about closure, about the difference between an ending and a completion. Kate had ended their relationship, but perhaps he needed to complete it himself. 2 days before the wedding, William made his decision. He would attend the ceremony, not the reception, which felt too intimate and celebratory, but the church service itself. He would sit in the back, witness Kate's marriage to James, and then leave. It would be his own private ritual of letting go. Saturday morning dawned cold and crisp, with the kind of bright winter sunshine that made everything look clean and new. William dressed carefully in his best suit, the navy blue one Kate had always said brought out his eyes.
He wasn't sure why he chose it, perhaps it was his way of honoring the man he had been when she loved him. St. Mary's Cathedral was exactly the kind of venue Kate would have chosen, elegant but not ostentatious, with soaring Gothic arches and stained glass windows that cast rainbow patterns across the stone floors. William arrived 30 minutes early and chose a seat in the last pew, where he could observe without being noticed. The church filled slowly with Kate's friends and family, faces William recognized from 8 years of shared social events. Many of them looked surprised to see him, their expressions ranging from sympathy to awkward uncertainty. Jennifer spotted him and approached with obvious concern. "William? I can't believe you came." "I needed to be here," he said simply. Jennifer studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "Are you going to be okay?" "I will be," William said, and, for the first time in months, he actually believed it might be true. As the ceremony time approached, the cathedral continued to fill. William was struck by how many people had come to celebrate Kate's happiness: colleagues from the hospital, friends from nursing school, relatives he remembered from family gatherings he had attended as Kate's boyfriend. The sight of Dr. Carter's family, strangers who would now be connected to Kate in ways William never would be, drove home the completeness of his replacement. At exactly 2 o'clock, the processional music began. William's heart started racing as the wedding party appeared at the back of the cathedral. Kate's bridesmaids walked down the aisle in deep red dresses, followed by James's groomsmen. They all looked young and happy and full of anticipation for the celebration to come. Then, Kate appeared on her father's arm, and William's breath caught in his throat. She was luminous. There was no other word for it. Her dress was simple but elegant, a classic design that emphasized her natural beauty rather than overwhelming it. Her hair was styled in an intricate updo that showed off the delicate pearl earrings William remembered giving her for her 30th birthday. She carried a bouquet of white roses and winter greenery, and her face was radiant with joy. But it wasn't just her beauty that struck William, it was the completeness of her happiness. Kate practically glowed as she walked down the aisle toward James, who was waiting at the altar with tears in his eyes. This wasn't a nervous bride going through the motions of an expected milestone. This was a woman who had found exactly where she belonged. William had never seen Kate look that happy during their 8 years together. Even in their best moments, their most content times, there had always been something slightly restrained about her joy, as if some part of her was holding back. Now, watching her approach the man she was about to marry, William saw what complete and uninhibited happiness looked like. The realization should have been devastating, but instead William felt something unexpected: relief. For months, he had tortured himself with the belief that Kate had made a mistake, that she had thrown away something precious for a temporary infatuation. Seeing her now, he understood that she hadn't made a mistake at all. She had found something with James that she had never had with William, something that made her more herself than she had ever been. The ceremony itself was beautiful and traditional. Kate and James exchanged vows they had written themselves, speaking of soulmates and destiny and the certainty they felt about their future together. Their voices were strong and clear, full of conviction that made William remember his own uncertainty during all those years when he and Kate had casually discussed marriage as something they might do someday. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Kate and James kissed with the passion of people who couldn't quite believe their good fortune. The congregation erupted in applause, and William found himself clapping too, caught up in the genuine joy that filled the cathedral. As the newly married couple walked back down the aisle together, Kate's eyes swept across the congregation, acknowledging friends and family with grateful smiles. For just a moment, her gaze found William in the back pew. Their eyes met, and Kate's expression registered surprise, then something that looked like gratitude. She mouthed thank you across the crowded aisle, and William nodded once in acknowledgement. Then, she was past him, her hand firmly clasped in her husband's, moving toward the cathedral doors and the reception that would celebrate the beginning of her new life. William remained seated as the congregation filed out, processing what he had just witnessed. For over a year, he had been grieving not just the loss of Kate, but the loss of his belief in their relationship itself. He had convinced himself that what they had shared was real and substantial, that Kate had simply been confused or temporarily seduced by novelty. But, watching Kate marry James, seeing the depth of joy and certainty in her face, William finally understood that what she had told him was true. She hadn't left him for someone else, she had left him to find herself. Their 8 years together hadn't been a lie, but they hadn't been her real life either. They had been a comfortable holding pattern while she waited to discover who she really was and what she really wanted. The cathedral was nearly empty now,
just William and a few elderly relatives who were moving slowly toward the exits. William stood and walked toward the doors, where winter sunshine streamed through the entrance, making everything look bright and full of possibility. Outside, the wedding party was gathered for photographs on the cathedral steps. Kate was laughing at something James had whispered in her ear, her bouquet clutched in her gloved hands. She looked like a woman who had found her place in the world. William walked past the photo session without looking back, making his way to his car with steady steps. The December air was sharp and clean, carrying the scent of snow that hadn't yet fallen. Christmas decorations twinkled from nearby shop windows, and the sound of wedding bells echoed across the plaza. As William drove home, he thought about his mother's words about completion versus ending. Kate had ended their relationship more than a year ago, but today William had finally completed it. He had witnessed her happiness and recognized it as something real and legitimate, not a betrayal of what they had shared but an affirmation of what they both deserved. For the first time since Kate had walked out of his life, William felt something other than loss and regret. It wasn't happiness exactly, not yet, but it was possibility. The understanding that his life could be more than the shadow of what he had lost. Back at his house, William found Mr. Whiskers waiting by the window, as he always did. The cat had finally stopped looking for Kate, finally accepted that William was his only human now. It had taken both of them a long time to adjust to their new reality, but they had managed it together. William changed out of his wedding attire and made himself dinner, something he had gradually learned to do without feeling sorry for himself. As he ate, he thought about calling his mother to tell her she had been right about closure. He thought about the work waiting for him on Monday, about the clients who depended on his expertise to navigate their own life transitions. Most surprisingly, he thought about the future not as something to endure, but as something that might actually hold good things for him. Maybe not the life he had planned with Kate, but a different life that could be fulfilling in its own way. Later that evening, as snow began to fall outside his windows, William sat in his living room with Mr. Whiskers purring on his lap. The house was quiet but no longer felt empty. It felt like a place where someone lived, someone who was finally ready to start moving forward. William took out his phone and deleted Kate's number from his contacts, removing the last easy temptation to reach out to a past that no longer belonged to him. Then, he opened his laptop and did something he hadn't done in over a year. He created a profile on a dating website. He wasn't ready to fall in love again, might not be for a long time. But he was ready to believe that love was possible for him, that somewhere out there was a woman who would see him the way Kate saw James, with certainty and joy and complete acceptance. William looked around his living room, really looked at it for the first time in months. Tomorrow, he decided, he would buy some new furniture. Maybe some plants. Maybe he would paint the bedroom a different color, something that reflected who he was becoming rather than who he had been. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in a blanket of white that made everything look fresh and new. It was December 15th, Kate's wedding day, but it was also the first day of William's new life. A life that would be entirely his own, built on his own choices and hopes rather than the remnants of someone else's discarded dreams. For the first time in over a year, William went to sleep feeling something that might eventually become happiness. It would take time, he knew, but time was something he had. Time to heal, time to grow, time to discover what his own version of joy might look like. The last thought William had before sleep claimed him was a surprising one: gratitude. Gratitude to Kate for having the courage to pursue her own happiness, even when it meant breaking his heart. Gratitude for the 8 years they had shared, which had taught him what love could be even if they hadn't been the lasting kind. And gratitude for the possibility that his best days weren't behind him, but still waiting somewhere in the future, like snow that hadn't yet fallen.